And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Today I'm not talking about Kingsburg, I'm talking about an expansion for Kingsburg to Forge a Realm. I don't think anyone ever calls it that. They say the Kingsburg expansion. Now, the Kingsburg expansion has 5 modules in it. I think 2 of those modules are absolutely essential and you should play with them every single game forever and ever, amen. I think 2 other of the modules, well, I think 1 more of the module you should probably play with. 1 I can take or leave and 1 I do not like at all. But still, 4 out of 5 modules is pretty good. This is a lot of fun to add. Let's take a look at each of the 5 modules and I'll tell you if I like them, why not, or why. Here we go. Module 1 takes you from having these original 20 buildings that are on the board to giving you a whole new player sheet that has 2 more rows. So now there is 8 times 4. There's 32 buildings on the board. I mean, this is awesome. The more variety, the better. Down here on the very bottom row that's been added, we have really cool military buildings. And so you can get extra dice. You can roll your own die with the military academy, and you can use that die instead of the king's. At the top, there's a way to get lots more resources, a sawmill, a quarry, a goldsmith, and a mint. Way to get more resources. So it's great to have these extra buildings on the board. That's Module 1. Essential. Great. Awesome. Module 2, just as good. Whole bunch of buildings here. Everyone gets 2 of these rows of buildings. And you look at each one of these. First you look at the little letter here in the corner, which is blurry, so you can't see that. But this one says B and C. And that means you would replace rows B and C here. Now you don't have to. You get to look at each one of these. So I could say here, for example, row B, let's take a close look and see if I want to use that one. Instead of the statue, I would get the bridge. No special ability, but it's worth another victory point. Instead of the chapel, I get an altar, which lets me re-roll dice if I get a 9 or less. A monastery at the end of the summer, if I have no goods, I get a victory point. Well, that's pretty interesting. The basilica can't be destroyed. So it's 8 points and it can never be destroyed. Do I want that instead? And so you have to decide. Now, these buildings are not automatically better than the other buildings. They're not, you know, when I compare them, I don't say, oh, it's obvious that the new buildings are better. But they're different. And what this means is you will likely, with these 2 modules combined, be using a very different setup than everyone else on the table. And to me, that's awesome. And that's why these are both essential. But even cooler, or I'm sorry, not even cooler, but just as cool, is this leader's deck. You can get one of these cards, you actually draw 3 of them and pick one, and this will be a special leader that you can use during the course of the game to give you a special ability. Like the miner here, at the end of every year you get a gold. At the end of year 4, you're going to get 2 gold. Or maybe the preacher at the end of every productive season, if at least 1 player has built no building in the current season, you get a victory point. Fairy, during the summer, you roll 1 extra white die. And there's all kinds of neat special abilities, and you'll be like, oh man, which one of these do I want to use? It's really cool. I use this in almost every game that I play. Not necessarily the first time I play with people, but it's such a great addition because it gives me something nobody else has. The event deck that is included with the game is something I can take or leave. Basically, each turn you draw a card and that's the event that will happen. It will just kind of changes the parameters of how the game works here. And it's a good year, so in every productive season, if you don't have a white die, you get one, and everyone else gets a free good of their choice. Here the king is pleased. Whoever has the most buildings is going to get 2 points instead of 1. Here's green power. Goblins and orcs are now +1. Tough advisors. It changes 6 to 4s and 5s to 3s. Fog of war. Instead of looking at the enemy, you get a chip token instead. Military parade. Whoever has the most military strength gets an extra victory point. The king is displeased. We skip the king's reward phase. And so these are good and or bad. They're mixed. Here's the king is sick. You can't influence the king. And if we draw another king is sick over the course of the game, and it's rare, but it can happen, then the game instantly ends because the king is now dead. And so these add something to the game. I don't mind them. They're not bad. I just don't see them, I don't know. They're okay. They add variety, but they're not as good as the first 3 modules. This is the module I don't like, although I can see why people do. At the end of each round, when you fight the bad guys, the king rolls a die, and that's how many forces he sends you. It's very random. Here, instead of the king rolling a die, you will pick one of these numbers, and you will send that number in. And the one that you don't use will be victory points at the end of the game for you, so you can save up. So this really encourages a heavy military. The reason I don't like it is because what if you don't want to follow a military strategy? You're kind of stuck following it anyway. I feel like there's not a lot of options here. I like the die roll. The die roll is crazy because you can't really depend on it, and you want to build up your military maybe despite the die roll, but it's still there. This, I don't know. It's okay, but it forces you to go for military because even if you saved your 4 for the last turn, that might not be enough, especially since, let's say there's 5 turns and you use a 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that enough military? It might not be. And I don't know. It's okay. I wouldn't not play the game with it, but it's my least module by far. So that's it. All kinds of stuff for Kingsburg. I use those first 3 modules all the time. When I teach new people the game, they don't even know that there was only 5 rows of buildings. They have all 20. I don't necessarily use the extra buildings all the time. Module 1, all the time. Module 2 with these rows of buildings, if they played before, definitely. Module 3, same thing. Module 4, you can convince me into it. Module 5, I'll ask you not to use it. So 5 modules though, pretty good for an expansion. Lots of fun.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.
Shut the door!
That's right. Shut it.
There.